When Governor Kristi Noem made a remark about Jasmine Crockett's background on live television, she likely assumed it would slip by unnoticed. But just 11 seconds later, Crockett responded with a calm, powerful statement that made people across the country reconsider who truly represents American values. They did not expect her to stay quiet, not after what Kristi Noem had just said. Not in a packed room, not with the cameras recording, and certainly not with the smug tone that carried through each word of Noem's jab. It took place during an Education and Labor Committee hearing in Washington. Inside room 2175 of the Rayburn House office building. The room was tense. Emotions had been building since the start of the day. Witness after witness, both sides had been trading subtle insults dressed in official language. But when Governor Noem got her chance to speak, she did not stick to the usual talking points. She leaned in, locking eyes with Representative Jasmine Crockett, the Congresswoman from Texas, and spoke in that slow, measured way she uses when aiming to get under someone's skin. Some of us come from generations who truly know what it means to work the land, build our homes with our hands, and raise children with real principles and not slogans. That is why we are here, pushing for meaningful change in education and empty politics. She paused, and then the corners of her mouth lifted slightly. Of course, not everyone comes from a bloodline that teaches that. There was no loud reaction from the room, just stillness. It's a kind of stillness that happens when people are trying to decide if they really heard what they think they heard. A staffer sitting behind Noem stiffened. Crockett stayed silent for the moment. She straightened up, folding her hands neatly on the table, eyes fixed on Noem. CSPAN's cameras remained focused on her expression. No shuffling of papers, no tapping the mic, no eye movement. Just 11 full seconds of quiet, and that silence said more than words could. Journalists at the back began typing quicker. An aide from California slowly reached for her phone, pretending to check messages while pressing record. Congressman 2 seats away from Crockett leaned over and whispered to a colleague, "Did she really say bloodline?" That word struck like a sudden blow. It was not necessary, but it was clear. A subtle signal said out loud. You could see it in the reactions. The older black woman in the second row, clutching her notebook more tightly, a Latino assistant from San Diego mouthing wow to himself. Even a few Republicans shifted uneasily. Still, Crockett did not give in to a quick reaction. She did not look angry. She did not argue. She stayed composed. And in that quiet, something changed. The balance in the room seemed to move, slowly drifting away from Noem and settling calmly on Crockett. When Jasmine finally leaned forward, her voice was low, even almost too steady. "Madam Governor, I appreciate you reminding this room how easy it is to use words when you have never had to live through what they mean." She did not raise her voice, did not blink quickly, did not miss a beat, just continued speaking. "Since we are bringing up family, let me give you a short lesson on mine. My mother taught in public schools in Dallas County for more than 30 years. My grandfather wore a military uniform and raised 4 children on a mechanic's pay. They did not own large property, but they lived with dignity. And they never needed to tell others they had values. They proved it through how they lived, day in and day out." Her words landed more sharply than any personal attack, and she was not finished. "So if this is really a conversation about education, then let us stay with that topic. Not hidden messages, not background. Not some made-up version of what makes someone qualified to speak about schools in America. Because I am confident that parents in Rapid City want the same as parents in Garland: safe classrooms, honest lessons, and children who leave school ready for life. It's not controlled by ideology." The room stayed silent. No interruptions. Not even from those who usually jumped at the chance to cut her off. It was only the start, but in that instant, everyone present sensed something had shifted. The remark Governor Noem had casually tossed out, hoping to make a point, had just backfired. And that was only the start of what was coming. What followed would have people across the country talking. It was not just about Jasmine's message, it was how she delivered it. The calm in her voice, the steady pace, no stumbles, no struggle to find words. No trying to sound clever. Just plain truth, spoken clearly and without fear. For a few in that room, it was the first time they saw her speak that way. Not in a short clip, not online. but live right there in front of them. Governor Noem's expression shifted slightly. Just a small reaction, but enough for Representative Charles Brenner of Idaho to notice. He looked from Crockett to Noem, then scribbled something quickly on his notepad. Even the usual whispers, the ones that usually follow sharp moments in these hearings, were missing. The room was still. To Jasmine's left, Congressman Reuben Fisk leaned in just a bit and quietly asked, "You all right?" Without turning to him, she nodded. "Doing better than she is?" she replied under her breath, eyes still ahead. Across the room, Noem's aide, a tall man in a navy blue suit with a red striped tie, leaned close and said something quick and sharp into her ear. She gave a brief nod and tried to take back the floor, clearing her throat like she was ready to press on. But she never got the chance. Chairman Hal Vickery, an independent from Oregon known for his sharp delivery, reached the microphone first. "Let's pause here," he said firmly. "Governor Noem, we will return to your remarks shortly. But at this time, I believe Representative Crockett has made her point hand. She made it with more control than many of us probably could have." His voice left no room for disagreement. And just like that, the tone and control in the room shifted again. This was no longer about setting up Jasmine for a misstep. What started as an attempt to box her in had become something else completely. People were no longer watching to see how she would react. Now they were truly listening. Representative Gina Morales from Nevada leaned forward, resting one hand on her face, clearly taking it in. She sent a quick message to her assistant. "Clip this timestamp, 1 hour, 17 minutes and 54 seconds. Just behind Jasmine." In the gallery, a row of public education supporters from Pennsylvania exchanged looks, eyes wide. One of them leaned in and whispered, "Did she just shift the whole balance in under a minute?" But what stood out most was not anything said, it was the body language. Governor Noem had gone rigid, jaw tight, eyes locked on her papers. For the first time that morning, she was not directing the room. She was part of it. And you could see the difference? At that moment, Jasmine turned slightly in her seat and quietly spoke to her legislative director, a young staffer named Ayanna Briggs. "Please send that transcript to my communications team." Every line, Ayanna smiled. "Already sent. It's clean." Jasmine let out a steady breath through her nose. "Let them come at me. I am ready." Because the truth is, Jasmine Crockett did not run for Congress to keep things comfortable. She was not concerned with sounding smooth or perfectly practiced. She came to get the work done, and right now, that meant telling the truth, even when it made others uneasy, especially then, a few minutes later, when the hearing resumed. The air in the room had changed. The smug looks were gone. The dismissive tone had faded. And while the meeting moved forward statements from a state school official, discussion on budget formulas, it was clear that most people were not paying close attention. They were still focused on what had just taken place. Even Representative Ellis Darnell, known for long, meandering questions, kept his comments brief. All eyes remained on Jasmine. And hers? They stayed on the facts, on the issues, and on the kids back in Texas, who still had no access to basic coding classes. Move through life or show up. Like polished politicians, the people she stood up for every single day. Because this moment was not about personal pride. It was about something much larger. A fight she understood better than anyone in that room. The same one they tried to exclude her from before she even stepped inside. But this was just the start. Of it, the real impact was still coming. Once it reached the internet, the conversation would explode. Her chair slid slightly as Jasmine leaned forward again, not for effect, not for attention, but because she still had something to say, and she knew the room had not tuned out. She looked at Noem not with irritation, not with a smile, just a calm, steady gaze. "Since we are on the subject of values," she began, "let me ask you this. When was the last time you actually sat inside a public school classroom? Not for pictures, not to announce a funding cut. I mean, really sat down, listened, and asked a student what they need." Noem did not reply. Jasmine turned her attention slightly toward the chairman. "We throw around the word values in here. All the time," she said. "But we keep acting like values only come from one type of experience. I keep hearing people talk about small farming towns like they're the only ones raising good kids, as if single mothers in places like Dallas or Jackson cannot raise responsible children. Like if you did not grow up stacking hay, you must not know anything about hard work or discipline. She paused, scanning the room, letting that message land. Let me tell you what values really look like, she continued, voice firm but calm. They look like my mother walking into a classroom with a broken air conditioner, a dozen students without pencils, and still managing to teach them both Shakespeare and algebra before lunch. Values look like my cousin Terrence, who never went to college, but is working 3 different jobs so his kids can. Values look like choosing patience over pride when someone tries to drag your name through the dirt on national TV. Said nothing, but it no longer mattered. The moment had shifted. Jasmine was no longer reacting. She was now setting the tone, and she knew it. You want to talk about bloodlines? Jasmine said. Mine taught me when to speak, how to tell the truth clearly without shouting, and how to face disrespect without turning to chaos. Then she added calmly, as if adding a final point. And by the way, while we are being truthful, rural America does not belong to just one group. There are black farmers in Mississippi too, Latino families working ranches, in southern Arizona, alongside vegetable growers in Minnesota, native communities who lived on this land long before it was ever called America. So if we are going to discuss who truly understands rural values, let us be honest and include everyone. It was hard to tell if Noem even caught that last line. She was flipping through her binder now, not making eye contact. But the rest of the room heard every word. An aide in the 3rd row leaned toward a colleague and whispered, "She is not just responding, she is educating." A young congresswoman from Vermont, barely 6 months into her term, jotted Jasmine's line into the margin of her notepad, then underlined it twice. The back, a C-SPAN tech, silently signaled to the director, "Keep the camera on her," and Jasmine. She did not gloat. She did not smile for the camera. She leaned back in her seat and glanced down at her notes like it was any regular Thursday. But the moment had already gone public. Ayana had posted the clip just 30 seconds earlier, trimmed for clarity, with captions cropped close enough to catch every shift in expression. The title was simple: Jasmine Crockett sets the record straight after Bloodline remark. By the time the hearing broke for lunch, the clip had already passed 400,000 views. It was Twitter that caught fire first. Screenshots, quotes, slow motion, replays. Then came Instagram Reels, TikToks, and a flood of reactions from journalists, teachers, and regular viewers. Some posted long threads about moments when they, too, felt that kind of dismissal at work. Others added their own clips, parents, veterans, kids from overlooked neighborhoods sharing their stories. And the comments came fast. This is how you speak the truth without shouting. Jasmine Crockett just gave a clinic in calm under pressure. Every black girl in law school just sat up straighter after watching this. The atmosphere had completely shifted. But outside the hearing room, a much larger storm was already brewing, and neither side was ready for what followed. Garland, Texas. That is where Jasmine Crockett came from. Not the kind of place that makes national news, just rows of working-class blocks east of Dallas. Fast food joints, corner shops, and schools that always seemed short on resources. She grew up on Crooked Creek Drive in a small one-story house, faded siding, a front porch just wide enough for 2 plastic chairs. Her mother, Doretta, was taught in public schools, the kind who brought home old posters and leftover milk cartons for class science projects. Her father had left before Jasmine turned 10, but her grandfather, Wallace, stepped in.
Out.
Did she feel the absence? Wallace Crockett did not waste words. He worked 6 days a week at a neighborhood auto shop, hands always covered in grease. The kind of man who would fix your car for free if you were late on rent hand, never say a word about it. It was Wallace who showed Jasmine how to use a torque wrench, how to change a tire, not because he thought she would be a mechanic, but because, as he put it, you should never wait for someone else to do what you can learn to do yourself. That voice stayed with her. When Jasmine was 13, she got suspended for 3 days after correcting a substitute teacher who claimed slavery had brought structure to the South's economy. She had not been disrespectful, she simply referenced what was in her textbook, But when the principal called her in, it was Jasmine's attitude that got questioned, not the teacher's error. Wallace picked her up that day. He said nothing on the drive home. At the kitchen table, he handed her a yellow legal pad and said, "Write down everything you meant to say but didn't get the chance to. All of it. Because one day, your words are going to reach farther than this school ever will." She did, and she kept that page folded, faded, and worn in a shoebox under her bed for years. By the time she was in high school, Jasmine joined debate club. Not because she enjoyed arguing, but because it was the only space where being well-spoken didn't make people uncomfortable. She had a talent not just for speaking, but for listening. She could hear what people meant, even when they tried to cover it up. Her mother often reminded her, "There's strength in holding back. Never let anyone shake your calm just because they lost theirs." That advice was tested more than once, especially in college at Rhodes University in Memphis, where she was one of the only black students in her pre-law classes. She learned fast how to stay balanced, speak clearly, keep her posture, and stay composed when someone asked what part of Chicago she was from, just because she was black. Law school brought more of the same. During her first internship in Little Rock, a senior partner at the firm mistook her for the assistant several times. She never forgot the day she cross-examined a witness and got a crucial admission in under 4 minutes. The look on that partner's face said everything. That was the moment Jasmine learned the difference between respect that is assumed and respect that is earned, and how to remain calm when someone tries to take both from you. So when Noem made that Bloodline comment in DC, Jasmine did not just hear the words. She heard every earlier moment where exclusion had been disguised as tradition. She felt the history behind it, the tone, the weight, but she also heard Wallace in her mind. They can only shake you if you hand them the keys. That is what kept her focused. That is why she responded with evidence, not emotion. And that legacy, the real one, was not built on family names or old land titles. It was built on strength, patience, and a quiet that came not from fear, but from knowing when to speak. So when the clip of her reply went viral, with hashtags like #HatchGraceInPower and Texas Backbone, it was not just about the moment. It was about what led to it, those porch talks with Wallace. The silent looks exchanged with her mother after rough school days. The long court hours spent listening before ever speaking. Jasmine Crockett did not come to Congress to create an image. She walked in already clear on who she was. The country was beginning to see it too. And not everyone was ready for that. Back inside the hearing room, a stack of printed statements and witness reports sat untouched. No one was thinking about page 32 of the superintendent's funding outline anymore. The conversation had moved on. Jasmine was leading it. As the chairman cleared his throat and signaled the committee back to order, Jasmine did not wait to be called on. She raised her hand, signaling she had one more point to make. No one objected, not even the Republicans, who usually pushed back just to stall her. She switched her mic on and spoke with the same directness she had all morning, since we are here to talk about the future of education in this country. She began, "Then let us actually center the conversation on students, not each other's personal history." Her eyes moved across the room not to provoke, but to hold people responsible. We have fifth graders learning from outdated textbooks. Teachers working double shifts just to keep their jobs. And instead of addressing the real problems, we are tossing coded insults across the aisle like this is some performance. Noem folded her arms but remained silent. She knew the cameras were still running, and she understood that the longer she stayed quiet, the more control of the moment she continued to lose. Jasmine kept going without pause. "I have read your record, Governor," she said in an even tone, "and I have a few questions. Like, why your administration cut funding for rural after-school programs in 2022? While claiming to support traditional family values? Or why literacy rates fell in some South Dakota counties while you were busy filming campaign ads with children holding flashcards?" Quiet stir moved through the gallery, just a shift in the room's air. That part had not shown up in the morning briefing. Noem had not expected her record to be examined this way. "You see," Jasmine continued, "real leadership is about facing your people when the numbers speak for themselves, not hiding behind vague terms like American values and acting like they only apply to people who look like you. It was clear, direct, not insulting, just straightforward. The kind of moment where the silence between her lines carried just as much weight as the words, representative. Reuben Fisk rubbed his temple, casting a quick glance toward the chairman. The tension in the room was building, not with drama or emotion, but with uncomfortable honesty laid out plainly. Jasmine shifted her focus slightly and addressed the full panel. If we really want to fix what is broken, then let us first admit the truth. This country is not split by geography, it is divided by who gets listened to. Because whether you live in a trailer in Arkansas or a housing block in Detroit, being poor does not make you less American. And growing up without a backyard does not mean you lack values. Her message went deeper than party lines. It reminded some why they entered politics in the first place, and others why they maybe should not have. Noem finally leaned forward. She did not respond. Instead, she organized her papers and cleared her throat, pretending to prepare for a follow-up. But it was too late. Jasmine had already continued, so let us actually do the work we came here to do. She said, voice calm but clear. Let us talk about fair funding. Let us talk about school counselors being replaced by part-time helpers. Let us talk about kids in McDowell County, West Virginia, or Calhoun County, Georgia, who cannot get internet after school and fall behind before they even get a chance. She paused, looked around again. Let us stop pretending. That line stayed in the air longer than the others, because no one had said it that way yet. And it created a line in the room between those ready to face the real issues, and those still holding on to the same old talking points. As the chairman finally brought the meeting back to the agenda, silence said more than any vote ever. Could Jasmine had entered that hearing as one among many?
Ow.
But by the end, she was the one people would be quoting, arguing over, and probably trying to discredit before the day was done. Yet even as her words moved through news feeds and headlines, something else was happening online. It was not coming from politicians. It was coming from regular people. The clip reached TikTok before the hearing even paused for coffee. Ayana uploaded it, no filters, no edits, no need for approval. No, she did not need it. Jasmine had told her years ago, if the truth hits hard, do not soften it. Let it hit. And it did by 12:24 p.m. The video had been reposted by 3 major political accounts. By 12:31, it had already crossed 2.1 million views. The caption was short, JasmineCrockett.com. Clear, unshakable. What followed was a digital wave video responses layered over her original speech. Teachers in Milwaukee, watching with tears. A mother in Fresno, playing it in her parked car. Pausing the video to say this right here is the kind of leadership people have been asking for. Even on platforms known for heated arguments, Reddit, X, and even parts of YouTube, the mood shifted. People were not just cheering her response. They were talking about how it made them feel. It reminded them of what their own mothers used to say when someone talked down to them. She was not only standing up for herself, she was standing up for many others. On MSNBC, the midday anchor played the clip twice and said this was not just a reaction to a subtle insult. It was a deliberate and calm takedown. Surprisingly, even some conservative radio hosts hesitated. One commentator on WBLT-FM in Missouri, normally quick to criticize progressive women, admitted, I might not agree with her politics, but that was solid. No shouting, no drama, just facts. Within just a few hours, Jasmine Crockett had gone from being relatively unknown to the most searched political figure of the day. Reporters rushed to dig up past interviews, clips from her law school years surfaced, and articles titled, Who is Jasmine Crockett? Landed on the front page of every major news site. But it was not just media attention, it was the people. Hundreds of public school teachers began sharing their own stories in the comment sections. Veterans posted family photos with captions like, This is our bloodline. Across the country, young black girls, many seeing someone like them commanding space and speaking confidently, stitched the video and quietly said, Thank you. Even Jasmine's phone, which she usually kept on Do Not Disturb, started buzzing non-stop from the flood of messages. She ignored most except one. It was from Wallace Jr. Uncle Wally, the message began. Your granddad would have smiled quietly today. He would have told you never let them shrink you. She smiled, then closed the screen. Back in her office, she did not celebrate. No drink, no putting her feet up. She leaned back in her chair and looked up at the ceiling. She knew how this worked. The praise always came first. Then the criticism. Then the trolls. That next wave always came harder than the moment itself, and just like clockwork by evening, the usual voices were picking at her tone, asking whether she had disrespected the governor, twisting her words into something more aggressive, but it did not land. Because the video was out there, the calm before she spoke, the steady tone, the facts. People had watched it themselves. They had felt it. They had shared it. Even her opponents found it difficult to dismiss her. Without sounding petty, during one cable panel that night, a commentator scoffed. She just wanted to go viral. But the other guest, a journalist from Minnesota, jumped in immediately. No, she wanted to be heard. Going viral was just what happened when you speak truth in a room that tried to ignore it. And that was the difference. Jasmine had not aimed for a viral moment. She had not practiced a speech. She just responded with everything she carried. Her mother's discipline, her grandfather's steady example, and the weight of classrooms forgotten. She poured it into that microphone. No yelling, no performance. Just a woman who knew who she was and refused to be pushed aside. But what the country had not seen yet, what was still to come, was the shift this moment had sparked inside the Capitol halls and back home in the places Jasmine always remembered. The hearing officially ended 2 hours later, but the real talk did not happen on record. It happened in side halls, in elevators, in cars on the way back to offices on Capitol Hill, and none of it was about budget, lines, or policy plans. It was about Jasmine. In a quiet hallway just off the hearing room, Representative Gina Morales caught up with her. She did not waste time. You know she is going to twist this, right? Jasmine turned to her. She can try. I am not concerned. She will, Gina replied. But that is no longer your problem. You just changed the tone in there. Jasmine gave a small shrug. I said what needed to be said. Gina nodded once. Hope you're ready for the spotlight. Because it is not fading anytime soon. Elsewhere in the building, Noem's aides were packed into a small office, door shut, blinds drawn. One looked angry, pacing. Another kept refreshing Twitter. She's getting hammered, the younger aide said. They are calling it the Bloodline moment. We need a statement. Noem stayed seated, face firm. We do not retract, she said through clenched teeth. That gives her a win. The senior aide looked at her. Governor, she already won. We're just deciding how loud we want to make it look. Jasmine was not focused on their damage control. She had a different kind of meeting, a quick, unplanned check-in with her legislative team. The vibe was relaxed but serious. Everyone kept working, typing, answering calls, keeping things moving. CNN is asking for a comment, Ayanna said from her desk. So is the Root. And Trevor Daniels from the Daily Ledger just sent over 3 questions, all of them basically asking if you planned it. Jasmine shook her head. Tell them I did not plan anything. Tell them I spoke because someone tried to shrink me on live camera. I know if they are more focused on the moment than the real issue, then they are asking the wrong person. Which Ayanna smiled. Got it? Still, there were messages they did not expect. A short email from Representative Myron Velez, someone who usually said very little, thanking her for reminding the room that being calm does not mean being weak. Voicemail from Congresswoman Trina Gillespie in Indiana. I just wanted to say thank you. We did not get many wins, but that one felt like it. Then came the quiet ones in the halls, people who had never spoken to Jasmine directly before. Handshake while waiting for food, a tap on the shoulder in the elevator. Silent nod from people who used to brush her off, now watching more closely. Some of it felt genuine. Some of it seemed like playing it safe. Jasmine did not need to figure that out right now. She had more important things to focus on. What stayed with her was not the media noise. It was the short pause in the elevator later that day. A young black intern, maybe 21 at most, stood beside her quietly for 2 floors. Just before walking out, he turned and said softly, "You made me proud today." That voice stayed with her when she went home. Meanwhile, Noem's team put out a vague response. No apologies, just a short clarification. 3 lines about respecting different backgrounds and a wish to refocus on student performance. It barely made a ripple. It did not trend, because the public had already seen enough, and no carefully crafted statement could change that. Behind the scenes, even in meetings, Jasmine was not part of the conversation was starting to shift at a strategy session. Later that evening, one conservative advisor told his team, "Say what you want about her politics, but she stayed composed, and that clip is not going away. You cannot beat someone like that by ignoring them." And on the other side of the aisle, another congresswoman told her chief of staff, she did not just win the exchange, she owned it. Still, Jasmine knew not to get too comfortable. The next few days would bring criticism, quotes taken out of context, as people trying to call her angry or divisive. That came with speaking hard truths in public. But she had dealt with it before, and she was ready to deal with it again, because while headlines kept spinning in media, teams scrambled to push new narratives back in her hometown. Something else was happening, something quieter, something stronger than any viral tweet. Garlands. Local news aired the clip during the 6 o'clock broadcast. Not just snippets, Jasmine's full reply, unedited. Old neighbors started calling her mother, asking if she had seen it. Of course she had. Dorita Crocker was in her living room, holding a cup of mint tea, remote in hand, watching closely. The same focused look she wore years ago while grading student essays late at night, head slightly tilted, taking it all in. She didn't speak loudly. She quietly said to herself she didn't need to. Across town in a high school auditorium, the same school where Jasmine once sat in the back, scribbling thoughts into a marble notebook, a group of students crowded around a phone. Her teacher had paused the lesson to show the video. "She's from here?" one boy asked. "Yeah," a girl near the front replied, "used to go to this school." The boy leaned closer, watching Jasmine speak. Her voice steady, unfazed by the setting. "She talks like she doesn't care who's watching." "No," the girl corrected. "She talks like she knows everyone's watching," and she did. Because the discussion had moved well beyond Capitol Hill, this was no longer just about one remark. It was about what that remark symbolized. And how many had heard something like it before? People began sharing their own stories. Nurses, retail workers, community leaders posting online, talking about the first time someone made them feel like they did not belong in a room, one after another. Strangers connected over Jasmine Crockett's calm refusal to be shaken. A school principal in Columbus wrote, "When they say bloodline, they often mean not one of us. Thank you for reminding folks that your value is not defined by your zip code." A former Marine from Kansas posted, "I don't care where your family is from. If you serve this country, you've earned your place. That is what matters." The focus had moved beyond Jasmine. It had grown. Suddenly, bloodline was no longer a careless insult. It became a marker of something deeper. A long-standing pattern of exclusion that many Americans had faced for generations. Cable panelists debated whether Noem's words were racist, classist, or simply poor wording, but most viewers did not need expert analysis to know how it felt. They had heard versions of it before. What made Crockett's answer stand out was not just her comment, was the shift she caused. No dramatics, no shouting. She did not ask for attention. She took the mic, used it carefully, and left no confusion. Behind, at a coffee shop in Baton Rouge, a grandmother sat across from her granddaughter and tapped replay on her phone for the 3rd time. "You see that?" she said. "That is how you keep your dignity without breaking a sweat." The girl smiled. "She made it look easy." "No, baby," the woman replied. "She made it look possible." Meanwhile, back in Washington, other lawmakers were having quiet conversations about what it means to show up in places not meant for you. Some admitted they had not thought deeply about certain things. Maybe now was the time to listen in a new way. A few lawmakers who once brushed Jasmine Crockett off saying she was too sharp or too focused on media were now watching that same clip again. Not to analyze how she spoke, but to figure out why it worked. She did not win over the room just by being ready. She did it because she spoke with real conviction, because she did not turn her pain into a weapon. she turned it into purpose. And by doing that, she reminded people of something this country often forgets. Your value is not something you are born with. It is something you show in small moments, in hard decisions, in how you carry yourself when someone tries to question whether you belong. But even as social media praised her and news stories kept circling, Jasmine was focused elsewhere. On a small stage, back in her home district, where a very different kind of moment waited. It was a Saturday morning when she pulled into the lot behind Grover Elementary. The air was thick with Texas heat, and sunlight bounced off the worn paint. On portable classrooms that lined the side of the building, like forgotten toys she had not visited in years, not since before the campaign. But this was familiar ground, and today was not about interviews or press coverage. There were no media crews outside, no staff members hurrying around. Just a folding table, some metal chairs, handwritten signs taped to the front doors. Community talk with Representative Jasmine Crockett, 10 a.m. Inside the gym, about 40 people had come. Parents, teachers, a couple of her old classmates, and even a few older voters who later admitted they did not vote for her, but came out of curiosity. Jasmine walked in with no team behind her, wearing jeans, a light yellow blouse, and her grandmother's earrings. No stage. Shh. No notes. Just her. She stood in front of them and spoke like she belonged there. "I am not here to impress anyone," she began. "I came because this school helped shape me, and I thought it was time to come back and say thank you." The applause started small, but grew louder. It was not just out of politeness, it was genuine. In the second row, her old fifth-grade teacher, Miss Dupernow, retired and walking with a cane, smiled. "You always did talk like you were older than the rest," she said with a laugh. Jasmine grinned. "You kept me after class so much, I had to grow up quick." The room laughed. Then it went still. They were ready for what came next. Not more jokes, but the reason. They had all come. Jasmine gave it to them plainly. She talked about the hearing, about Noem's remark and how it felt, not just as someone in office, but as a daughter, a former student, a woman from this very neighborhood who had often been told, sometimes subtly, sometimes bluntly, that she did not fit. She did not go. Over every insult. She did not have to. What she shared was how it felt to sit at a table in Washington while someone questioned the worth of your family in front of others, and how, in that moment, you have two choices: stand up for yourself or stand up for the people who made you who you are. "I was not going to let anyone change the story of this place," she said, "not while I am still standing." There was silence. Then, from the back of the gym, a voice, "Thank you for saying it." Everyone turned. It was a man in a camouflage jacket, maybe in his 50s, hands rough from work, eyes tired. He nodded once. "They have been putting people down for too long. You stopped at Tevin, if just for a bit." And with that, the stories began. A mother shared how her son was sent home for wearing shoes that did not meet the school's dress code. Teacher spoke about having to teach history using only YouTube and worn-out textbooks from over a decade ago. A teenage girl, holding back tears, said, "I saw your clip in class. I didn't know I could talk like that and still be heard." Jasmine walked to her, gave her a quiet hug. "You do not need to sound like anyone else to matter," she said. "Just speak. They will hear you even if it takes time." The session went longer than planned, but no one was in a hurry to leave, because what Jasmine had done in D.C., she was now doing here, taking back the space, reminding people their voices were never small to begin with. Like their stories, their version of values mattered, and it did not feel rehearsed. It was not flashy, it was simply real. That is what stayed with people. Later, as the crowd slowly left, an older man stayed behind. He had been quiet during the entire session, arms crossed, saying nothing, as Jasmine finished packing up. He stepped forward and handed her a photo. "My brother served with your grandfather Wallace Crockett, right?" She paused, surprised. "You knew him?" "Yeah," the man nodded. "We were stationed together in Okinawa." He did not say much, but when he spoke, people listened. She looked at the photo, two young men in uniform, arms around each other. half smiling. "Now I see where you get it," he said. "That's strength underneath." Jasmine held the photo a bit tighter. That moment felt personal, even healing. But the larger story was still in motion, moving towards something no one could shape or stop. Monday morning arrived quietly. There was no media storm, no sudden crisis to shift attention, but something had shifted, not just in the news, but in how people were speaking her name. Jasmine sat alone in her office before the day began. The first rays of sunlight peeked through her window blinds. She drank from a worn-out mug with Doretta's daughter faded in marker, a birthday gift from a cousin. Long ago, no lights, no clapping, just quiet. She opened her laptop and scrolled past the headlines. Crockett challenges Capitol. Power norms. The response echoed nationwide. What bloodline really means in government. She glanced at them. She did not need to read every word. She had lived it. Her inbox was packed. A school principal from Flint, a janitor in Jackson, a single father from Idaho who wrote, "I never thought someone in Congress would sound like. They grew up down the street. Thank you." There were critics too. Some columns called her divisive. And threads online debated her tone. But those voices did not hold much power because the truth was not in clickbait or comments. It was in that hearing room. In the silence that followed the remark, the calm strength of her voice, in the choice not to lower herself, but to rise above. That morning, she returned a call she had put off. Her mother had left a voicemail the night before. "You have been busy," Doretta said as soon as Jasmine answered. Jasmine smiled faintly. "You know what your grandfather would have said?" Jasmine leaned back in her chair. "Something short," she said. "He would have said, 'That is how you hold your head up without raising your voice.'" Even while speaking, they both laughed. Then came silence again. But this time, the peaceful kind, because the point was never to pull someone down. It was always about holding your ground when someone tried to define you by where you come from. Instead of who you are later that day, Jasmine met with a group of high school seniors, part of a national leadership program visiting Capitol Hill. One of the students, a girl with long braids and braces, asked softly, "How do you stay calm when someone says something meant to tear you down?" Jasmine paused. She thought of that hearing, and of the many moments before it when people had told her she was too bold, too direct, too black. "Let me know when you are ready for too proud." "I do not think about what they meant to do," she said at last. "I think about who is paying attention, because someone always is. And if I let someone small make me feel small, what am I teaching those who look up to me?" The girl nodded slowly and quietly wrote something in her notebook. Jasmine did not ask what it was. Later that evening, Ayana walked into her office, holding a small envelope. "This came in the mail," she said. It was handwritten, no return. Addressed. Jasmine opened it. Inside was a note, written in neat cursive. "You did not just speak for yourself, you spoke for me too. A grandmother who thought she would never be seen. No name." Just that. Jasmine folded the letter carefully and placed it in the top drawer of her desk, next to a photo of her mother standing in a classroom filled with third graders, and beside an old sheet of legal pad paper with a few lines scribbled by. A 13-year-old girl, the same girl, who had once been told her voice was too strong for the world she was stepping into. All of this, it was never about ego, it was never about trending headlines or applause from strangers. It was about proving, again and again, that respect is not something you ask for. It is something you carry, and when someone tries to take it from you, you do not yell to get it back. You speak with clarity, with roots, with your whole self, because that is how ego gets pushed aside, not with anger, but with truth. And Jasmine Crockett understood when truth holds steady, even the loudest noise cannot shake it. Know your value. Speak your truth. Do not wait for approval to be treated with respect. Subscribe if you believe grace can be powerful and power does not need to raise its voice.